The timing screens delivered a simple headline: Lando Norris, fastest, McLaren on top. For most viewers, that's where the story ends. A fastest lap is a fastest lap. But inside the paddock, lap times are never conclusions. They're invitations to dig deeper. Because what unsettled rival teams that day wasn't who topped the chart, it was who didn't need to. While Norris produced a sharp headline number, engineers immediately began focusing elsewhere, on Max Verstappen. Not because he was quicker, but because his pace looked repeatable in a way that mattered far more under the current rule set. Formula One is no longer about isolated moments of speed. The modern car lives and dies by energy management, how efficiently it harvests power, how consistently it deploys it, and how little performance drops when conditions change. In that environment, a single flying lap can hide as much as it reveals. McLaren's fastest time arrived late in the day, after a productive morning that already saw heavy mileage. From an operational perspective, it was impressive. No stoppages, no reliability scares, the kind of day teams hope for in testing. But Red Bull's work followed a different logic. Instead of chasing a headline, they chased volume. Verstappen remained in the car all day, quietly logging lap after lap, not pushing for attention, not forcing pace, just building a data set wide enough to expose patterns. And patterns are what engineers trust. As analysts filtered out installation laps and calibration runs, a different picture began to emerge. Verstappen's averages kept surfacing near the top, regardless of compound, regardless of run length. The RB wasn't peaking, it was settling. That distinction matters more than most fans realize. Early in a regulation cycle, cars usually swing between promise and unpredictability. Fast one lap, awkward the next. What Red Bull showed instead was restraint, a car already trimmed of volatility, which leads to the uncomfortable question no timing sheet can answer. Is it better to be fastest once or controllable always? Because if repeatability wins championships, then the most dangerous car on track may not be the one leading the times, but the one quietly refusing to fall away. If lap times aren't telling the full story, what exactly were rival teams seeing inside Red Bull's data that made them uneasy? Mileage doesn't guarantee performance, but it guarantees opportunity. And on that day, Red Bull used opportunity better than anyone else. While McLaren split running between drivers, Verstappen alone completed over 130 laps, surpassing what some teams managed across their entire lineup. That volume mattered, not because of raw distance, but because of what it allowed engineers to isolate. Once analysts stripped away non-representative runs, something striking appeared. Across soft, medium, and hard compounds, Verstappen repeatedly hovered inside an unusually tight lap time window. No dramatic fall-offs, no sharp spikes, just controlled, disciplined pace. That level of consistency is rare this early. Most new generation cars still feel undecided, unsure how to balance deployment and recovery. The Red Bull, by contrast, looked rehearsed, as if its operating window had already been narrowed. This is where the energy story begins to dominate. And if you enjoy this kind of deep Formula One analysis, not just lap times, but why they happen, make sure you're subscribed. More breakdowns like this are coming. Multiple observers noted that the RB continued deploying power at points where others clearly tapered off. The visual cues were unmistakable. Stronger exits, sustained straight-line acceleration, less hesitation. Even rival teams noticed. Inside the paddock, the discussion shifted away from peak speed and towards sustainability. Not how fast is it once, but how long can it keep doing that? That distinction explains why the RB's runs drew attention even without a headline lap. And then there was the driving. At a critical braking zone, a corner typically taken in second gear, Verstappen repeatedly downshifted to first while still deep on the brakes. It looked aggressive, slightly unstable, but deliberate. The goal wasn't lap time, it was energy recovery. By forcing higher rev spikes under braking, Verstappen maximized harvesting into the battery, feeding the systems that will dominate performance under the upcoming power unit philosophy. Others experimented with similar techniques. Few looked comfortable doing it. Red Bull did. The car still slid, the wind still unsettled it, but compared to rivals, the RB appeared prepared, not reactive, which reframes the entire day. McLaren proved it could be quick. Red Bull hinted it could be efficient, and efficiency is what wins races when everyone else is managing. If Red Bull already understands the harvest-deploy trade better than its rivals, how far ahead does that put them when race simulations finally begin? No one inside the paddock dismissed Norris's lap. The McLaren is genuinely quick, but speed without context is incomplete information. The issue wasn't the lap itself, it was what hadn't yet been shown. McLaren hadn't committed to a full race-style simulation. There was no clear reference for how their car behaves once tire degradation and energy demand collide. And that gap matters. Here's a question I want to hear your take on, and I'll reply to the best answers personally. What is the one part of Max Verstappen's driving style you think other drivers simply can't replicate? And why? Is it his braking, his car control at the limit, or how quickly he adapts when conditions change? Drop your answer in the comments and I'll jump in with my own response. Now back to the topic. Modern Formula One rewards the car that wastes the least energy, not the one that produces the cleanest single lap. Over a race distance, margins compress. The smallest inefficiencies compound. That's why engineers began asking a different question by day's end. Who looks most capable of repeating their pace under Sunday conditions? Other teams provided useful reference points. Ferrari logged solid mileage, but the car appeared busy mid-corner, responsive on entry, less settled at the apex. Drivers reported complexity rather than calm. Mercedes, meanwhile, had a fragmented day. Limited running prevented them from building a clear picture, even if glimpses of long-run pace looked respectable. Elsewhere, contrasts were stark. Some teams struggled with distance. Others quietly banked laps. None used the day as effectively as Red Bull. And that's what changed the tone of the conversation. By sunset, the timing sheet still showed Norris at the top, but the paddock was no longer talking about Norris. They were talking about repeatability, about energy discipline, about which car already looks like it understands what this generation demands. Testing is always deceptive. Fuel loads lie. Engine modes mask reality. Certainty is dangerous. But first impressions matter, especially among engineers. And Red Bull left one that extended far beyond second place. If headline pace isn't the true benchmark anymore, what should fans actually be watching as this regulation cycle unfolds? What made Red Bull's day especially uncomfortable for rivals wasn't just the car. It was the fit between machine and driver. Verstappen didn't drive the RB like a test mule. He drove it like a system operator, deliberately provoking instability, harvesting aggressively, correcting precisely. That matters because these cars demand more from drivers than ever before. Lift and coast zones are expanding. Energy targets dictate braking shapes. Drivers are no longer just racing rivals, they're managing algorithms. Some adapt faster than others. While others describe the systems as complex, Verstappen appeared fluent in them. His inputs looked intentional, not exploratory. That fluency is difficult to teach and impossible to fake, which leads to an uncomfortable realization for the rest of the grid. If Red Bull's hardware is already efficient and its lead driver already understands how to exploit it, then the advantage isn't a setup tweak away. It's structural. That's why second place felt louder than first. If Verstappen is already driving the future while others are still learning it, how long will that gap last? Testing never tells the truth outright, but it does reveal tendencies. And the tendency emerging here is this. Red Bull looks prepared for repetition. Others look prepared for speed. That distinction will define the season. When races become management exercises, the car that feels calm under constraint wins. The RB already looks like it understands that environment. The danger for rivals isn't that Red Bull is fastest, it's that Red Bull seems comfortable not needing to be. If comfort under constraint is the real weapon, which teams are already in trouble? By the end of the day, one question hung in the air. What if leading the times was the least important thing anyone achieved? Because if the long runs are telling the truth, if repeatability really is king, then the real benchmark may already be set. So here's the question that matters. Is Norris's headline pace the real signal? Or is Verstappen's discipline the warning sign? Let me know what you think. What happened behind the fastest lap wasn't a coincidence. And it wasn't just about car performance. It was about a driving style that modern Formula One is quietly rewarding more than ever. When engineers replayed the data, they didn't just look at speed traces. They studied how the lap was built. Throttle application, brake pressure curves, steering corrections, and energy usage across the lap. And that's where the difference became impossible to ignore. Max Verstappen wasn't driving to impress a timing screen. He was driving to control the system. His inputs were sharper but shorter. His corrections smaller. His commitment earlier. Where other drivers waited for the car to settle before applying power, Verstappen trusted the rotation he created himself. That trust is everything. Modern F1 cars don't reward hesitation. They punish it. The current regulations, and especially what's coming, demand drivers who can live on the edge of instability without crossing it. Verstappen doesn't just tolerate that edge, he uses it. That's why his laps often look less dramatic than they actually are. There's no visible wrestling, no exaggerated corrections, just a car that appears to flow, even when it's technically being pushed harder than most. This is why comparing fastest laps in isolation misses the point. One lap can be manufactured with perfect conditions, light fuel, and full deployment. But driving style reveals itself over every lap, especially the ones no one is watching. Verstappen's style scales. It works on new tires and worn ones. It works in clean air and dirty air. It works when the systems are aggressive and when they're restricted. And that's the difference. Because when regulations tighten, when drivers are forced to manage more and attack less, the advantage shifts away from pure flair and toward control. Toward drivers who can feel grip before it disappears, who can sense balance before it breaks. That's not something you learn quickly. It's something you build over years. And Verstappen has been building it his entire career. If you want the full breakdown of why this driving style is so hard to copy, check out Max Verstappen's Driving Style Explained, Why Nobody Can Match Him. That video goes deeper into how his braking, rotation, and throttle control give him an edge no setup change can replicate.